Cool.
So there's I'm gonna forget his name, but there's one of the anecdotes from the book Easy Beauty is a friend who
Hmm.
was who always wanted to help you and say, hey, I'm gonna get you out of the car, and you're like, no, I'm good. No, I'm gonna help you. And I do believe, well-meaning, but you really, I can just, you paint the picture so well. I can just see like the tension rising. You really just like, no, I got it, and just really not being heard, right? I
Yeah.
got it. I can do this. Where's the line for, where you don't have to be somebody educating 100%, you don't have to educate everyone, because I would assume that would be incredibly taxing. But somebody who I think means well, but is ignorant, I guess, in the true sense of the word, like doesn't know. So I guess
Hmm.
where's that line between, like, someone like you would have to be an educator, and that's just too much. And I guess it goes to the whole idea of like movies and books that either maybe don't have any representation whatsoever for disabled people versus having negative. I know it's a big kind of generic question. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I actually think the answer is pretty simple. Like, I don't really think there's any problem with offering anybody in this world your assistance and
Mm-hmm.
saying, can I help you with something? Do you need something? Can I offer you this? The problem is just simply when people don't listen to the answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the dehumanizing, aspects of these like good intentions that turn into a form of prejudice, that's the line.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are times, I think that it's interesting because we were just talking about Andrew Leland's book, and he has in the introduction, he talks about with blindness that um, people will sort of ask these very insulting questions of like, can you feed yourself? Like, who dresses you? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and those questions are just displaying a real lack of imagination. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's a very prevalent thing in the lives of disabled people, or certainly in my life, is the amazing limitations of other people's imaginations of my
Mm-hmm.
abilities. So there are times where, like I've gotten onto an airplane, taken the whole airplane ride, and then someone comes up to me and says, do you need a wheelchair to get off the airplane? And I think, well, how did I get on there? Did you not see me get on the airplane? Or like, did you not think I had a plan for getting
Uh,
off the airplane? Or, same thing, like I'll be on the subway and getting, have some groceries or something and be carrying up the stairs, and people will be like, do you know, like take the elevator, or how are you going to get up the stairs? I'll carry this bag for you. And it's like, do you not see that I have a plan here? Like,
yeah, yeah,
I've gotten onto the subway, and I can figure out how to get off the
yeah.
subway. And so there are times where that offer of help just simply is, you might be exposing your complete inability to imagine the wholeness of someone else. But I would
Mm-hmm.
say for the most part, I don't find it offensive if somebody offers the help. The thing that I find to be really hurtful is when someone doesn't trust my response. So if you
Uh-huh.
say, hey, would you like me to carry those groceries for you? And I say, no, thank you. And then you go, no, really, 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 I think you
That's where
should
you let it
let
go,
me.
right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that scene with my dear friend Judd, who I
Mm-hmm.
love so much, whose birthday was just 2 days ago, I think he's a really great, and luckily he's very game to be lovingly called out in this way. And I also don't come off, perfect in this scene either, but I think it was a really great example of showing this difficulty around good intentions that turn into sort of dehumanizing actions. Because I
Yes.
was pregnant at the time. So that's another layer of sort of disbelieving my agency.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves me. He loves my unborn child. He wants to help me. He wants to protect me. He wants to be chivalrous and deeply, deeply supportive. And he was giving me a ride. He would give me a ride home pretty often from teaching, and he wouldn't let me walk up the stairs to my
Yeah.
own apartment by myself. And after the 10th time or whatever that this happens, where I'm explaining to him over and over again, I in fact walk up these stairs every single day. Like, I might be slower than most people, or I might have to grip the railing tighter, but I can do this. He couldn't really trust that. He kept seeing
Mm-hmm.
the worst happening. and he kept negating my responses and
Yeah.
negating my agency to the point where I, explode on him.
Right.
Poor Judd. But it was important for me to give that example in context of like, this is a man who means well, loves me, wants the best for me, but in that particular moment can't see me as a real person, can't trust me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that's unacceptable. Like that's not an okay way to treat
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm I'm mixing parts in the book. This, you were not talking about this particular incident, but I don't think it was Iris Murdoch. I think it was maybe the woman who talked about the beauty of a palm tree.
Yeah, Lane's scary. Yeah.
Right.
Lane's
Who,
scary.
but you just now you're talking about imagination, imagination, imagination. I thought that was such a key point in the book about, like, let's say, like, encountering beauty, processing beauty. It's just, I guess imagination obviously is the opposite of ignorance in many ways, but
Mm.
it's just like opening, like being imaginative enough to think a different way. Um,
Hmm.
I think imagination is so interesting in the way they use it here. The book is called Easy Beauty, and it, in some ways, I mean, I think it revolves around, I counted maybe 6 trips. Um,
Yeah, maybe. I don't know off the
right,
top.
okay, yeah,
I
I
have
know,
to go
right?
and count. Yeah.
Okay, quick
Something
quiz.
like that. There's
What's the,
12. Well, there's 12 chapters, and
yeah,
each chapter takes place in a different city, but one of them is Brooklyn.
right.
Yeah, there's something like that.
You know,
6 to 10 trips. I should.
but starting almost in the middle is okay. So I don't know if you set this up as like a big reveal or not, but I was like, I might have let out an audible whoa. It was so cool. So you go to San Siro, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, the
Yeah.
stadium in Milan,
Uh-huh.
right? And I'm like, all right, you wrote about some about 80,000 people, capacity. I'm like, all right, she's gonna go see, AC Milan, the soccer team, and it was to see Beyonce.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Easy Beauty is the title. And when you were presented with the possibility to go to see Beyonce in New York, I think it was too late, right? It already passed and whatever.
Yeah, I
Now,
sort of rejected it, and I was
right,
acting as though I didn't want to go, and I was sort of
right,
seeing it as like,
yeah,
an experience. The truth, of course, is that it was an experience I feared already excluded me. So I was trying to
mhm.
exclude it from my
Okay.
life, before it could, yeah. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna break up with her before she breaks up with me,
Totally. Yes,
right?
exactly.
So I mean, I mean, but it's like, it's Easy Beauty. Would you define that as something like it's cliche, it's been done, it's not hard fought, like your dad wants to travel and go to East Asia and go all over the world, and meet all kinds of different people and keep it moving, like they say in New York, because you're going to learn that way. It's a hard fought victory, and it sounds like you have a lot of that as well. Is that the key? What I guess, what is the opposite of easy beauty? Is it hard beauty?
Difficult beauty. So,
Difficult
I
beauty.
mean, the phrase easy beauty and difficult beauty come from this philosopher Bernard Bosanquet, who I talk about in that Beyonce chapter. And the thing is like the way you're talking about it is the way that I sort of problematically and incorrectly interpret the difference between easy and difficult beauty.
Mm-hmm.
So Bosanquet just simply says we should be aware of these differences in the way that we process beauty. Here are two sort of basic, crude categories. There's beauty that, this is what he's saying. He doesn't put a value judgment on them. He says easy beauty is just beauty that arrives to our senses immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, the great majority maybe of our day's pleasure comes from easy beauty, looking outside on a sunny day, or going to the beach if you can, and seeing the ocean quickly and appreciating it, or seeing a rose, or hearing a simple rhythm that makes you want to dance. And these are all things that, ideally we would give a lot of credit to and value to, and
Mm-hmm.
but they just come to us, they come to our senses instantly. Enjoying an incredible meal that the second it, lands on your
Mm-hmm.
tongue, you're like, oh, this is great. I don't have to think about it. I'm
Yes.
enjoying it. I'm happy in the experience of pleasure, that comes from our senses, which is the term aesthetic means, is based in the idea of our senses, what appeals to our senses. So
Mm-hmm.
this is what he calls easy beauty. And then he says, but there's this other type of beauty called difficult beauty that requires more time to process, more patience. Sometimes it requires education. Sometimes you have to learn about a thing before you see its beauty. Sometimes you need a great teacher to guide you through and explain what's beautiful about this thing. Or sometimes you need this thing that he calls width. And it's sort of a technical term that he's using in this particular context. And he says there is some types of beauty that are so sort of massive and overwhelming that when we are facing them, we, in comparison, feel very small. And we see the sort of tininess of our own life.
Mm-hmm.
And he says it kind of takes a specific sort of person to be able to sit in the tininess of their life and the sort of increased insignificance of their life in the face of some gigantic, massive, difficult form of beauty,
Mm-hmm.
and see it as valuable. So like sit in that tension and complexity and see it as valuable. So that might happen to us, like, looking at the massive mountain range and for a
Mm-hmm.
moment recognizing, wow, the enormity of these mountains are beyond my comprehension as like a tiny little human that's going to exist in a speck of time in comparison to the natural world. Like
Mm-hmm.
there can be a feeling of deep sort of like conflict within us, or resistance to wanting to feel that our own lives are small. But there's this other way in which we can look at the mountain range, feel the smallness of our lives, and feel the world widening
Mm-hmm.
and be in awe of that, right? So Bosanquet just really wants to draw our attention to the fact that beauty can arrive in these different ways. And part of the problem that I make it for myself, because I see my own body as being a source of difficult beauty and not immediate easy beauty, is that I choose to devalue easy beauty and see it as like, oh, that's easy beauty is just things for, uneducated people, or it's trite, it's cliche. But that's not true. Like a rose is not, it's like
Yeah.
a rose is beautiful, a sunset's
Right.
beautiful. Like
Right.
to turn your nose up at something just because it can arrive to our senses swiftly,
Mm-hmm.
that's just hurting myself. So part of the journey of the book is to learn how to embrace both of these forms of beauty, but
Mm-hmm.
more specifically within my own relationship to my son,
Mm-hmm.
and the sort of immediacy of the beauty of my life with him that I couldn't fully trust, or couldn't at the beginning of the book like embrace as deeply. So the last, this is no spoiler, but one of the last scenes of the book is just me walking home with my son on a particularly beautiful day in Brooklyn in October, and just valuing the beauty of this like golden hue of this October sun and the little beads of sweat
Yeah.
on Wolfgang's face, and just yeah, finding great beauty there that doesn't need, a whole bibliography to unpack.
Mm.
So yeah, that's the tension of those two terms.
How old is your son now?
He's 11.
Oh my gosh. I I am so impressed by how well you write about motherhood, parenthood. With foibles is not even the word. I mean, they're, some of the very serious fears that he has. And I mean, in the world that we're in, it's
Mm.
it's such a nerve-wracking thing to be a parent. It's always been a nerve-wracking thing to be a parent, right?
Yeah.
But I've tried with very, very little success to write about being a father, being a parent. It's
Mm.
just, because I always feel like mine comes off as so cliched. But yours doesn't. Yours is, and I'm sorry to keep using the word banality, but I think the last couple words of the book are like this, I want to say spurgle, the burbling of the coffee pot, something like that, right?
Oh
Just
yeah.
those daily things
Yeah.
that we try not to take for granted. It's so hard to write about that without coming off as cliche, and you don't. I think that's because you feature a lot of the difficulties, and it's very honest. There's big pharma, there's big tech. Like, this is a safe space. Did you get bullied by big Beyonce to like write?
No,
you know how the Beehive gets, right? I mean, you really did enjoy the show.
But I write about her
Blink
so
twice if you blink
lovingly.
twice if you didn't enjoy the show. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I write about her so lovingly.
I
I
know, I
hope
know.
Beyonce fans, I think, understand. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
I write about her Beyonce's radical presence and the
being in the
way of,
moment, right?
yeah, being with her in the moment, and also I write about like being part of a, you know, like massive wave of human joy. Like
Yeah.
I had never experienced anything even close to this. I'd been to stadium concerts and I'd been to different shows in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but the kind of joy that she is capable of bringing to a crowd of 80,000 people,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's not to be missed. This was, I have this student who says, "Oh, you should go have an epiphany at a Beyonce concert." And I'm going, "Oh, I don't want to do that. That sounds ridiculous to me." And then I go and I do have this epiphany because to be caught in an energy wave like that
Mhm.
of people just like so many thousands of people so happy, and then for her to be willing to give us her total presence, like
Mm.
I don't think it matters if you like her music or not, or if you're interested in her as a cultural figure or not. Like, I just think to be,
It's visceral, right?
oh, it's so visceral, and it reminds you why a life with others is crucial.
Yeah.
This kind of feeling you cannot have being a little isolated island unto yourself, which is my natural instinct, is
Yeah.
withdrawal, aloneness, interiority,
Yeah.
privacy, separateness. And because I'm so deeply oriented in that way, I kind of need like to be yanked out of that by big joy. And Beyonce,
Mhm.
man, she just creates big joy for people.
Mm.
And no, I think the Bayhive and I are on the same team for sure.
All right.
No harassment.
I know, I know. That sounds like an incredible show. The interior, the individual experiencing beauty. You talk, I get that, right? As a reader, as an aesthete, like you talk about with your father,
Mhm.
and a lot of your negative experiences, even at the Milan show,
Mhm.
just you thought about leaving, right? Because it's like, oh man, I'm gonna be in a space where I'm not gonna be able to see.
Yeah.
I very clever way that you got, down below and all that, and also the kind of what's the word, infantilizing,
Oh,
infantilizing
infantilizing. Yeah.
that came up there, but you finally got an incredible experience.
Mhm.
And also with Roger Federer, right? This was when you went to Indian Wells and you didn't consider yourself to be a tennis expert, didn't necessarily know much about it. And after a while, you were just able to let yourself go and just be like, this, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
I get it. It's maybe the hipster thing to be into Federer, if you will, and everyone likes Federer, but there's a reason why everyone likes Federer.
Yeah.
My long way of getting to a question too is, pop music. Obviously, pop
Mhm.
is short for popular. There's a reason it's popular. Is you write about philosophy, but it's not like you're not writing about the Stoics for 400 pages. You're not writing about Aristotle for 400. I wonder about like how you were able to integrate philosophy, when there's so much like pop philosophy around now and so much like short form, and you made it into a long form. Like, how are you able to
Mhm.
put that into a quote unquote like mainstream pop book?
Well, I think that I was just trying to be very authentic to how my particular brain is actually processing the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my the details of my life don't really matter, but maybe there's something about the bigger human questions that I'm trying to ask in this book that matters. But if I try to come at these bigger human questions, like how do we change? How do we become more present? How do we become more integrated in our lives? How do we seek beauty in ways that makes us better agents of our community? The big Iris Murdoch question about unselfing, like those are all, I think, big, relevant, human, important, universal questions. And that's really the goal of the writing. But of course, one must come at those questions in as specific and particular way as possible. So I just really tried to put my authentic brain on the page.
Mm-hmm.
And my authentic brain is, I studied philosophy. I was reading a lot of philosophy. So that was part of how I was making connections. There's references to poems that I was reading.
Mm.
There's references to Beyonce because I was going to a Beyonce
Mhm.
concert. There's Federer because I was watching tennis. There's conversations with other philosophers, other like, big sort of cultural icons, but also with my mother and my son and
Mm.
my friends. And so I think that what was crucial to me was not to do some sort of like, let me explain the philosophy of this to a general audience.
Mhm.
What was crucial to me was let me actually genuinely impart the texture of my life and the nuances of my mind and how it processes the world. The goal of the book is not to explain what Aristotle says about, the weakness of the spectator or something, or what Bosanquet says about easy versus difficult beauty. The goal of the book is to deeply and sometimes subversively counteract this commonly held view that the disabled life is somehow inherently inferior and less worth
Mhm.
living. The only way this book has value in the world is if it helps somebody like me or helps somebody with a body like mine or in my community.
Mhm.
And I don't mean help them in the sense that like I'm empathizing with them or we can empathize with each other. What I mean is, could this book actually improve the conditions of their lives by arguing fully and for, almost 300 pages that the disabled life is actually quite whole and extremely well worth living. And I think the only way that I could do that is to say, here is an entire life. I mean, and I don't mean here are the details of my whole life, because it
Sure.
actually takes places. The president of the book is only 18 months. So it's not
Yes.
that I'm giving the scope of my biography, but I am giving the wholeness of a mind.
Mm.
Um, and that includes how I'm thinking, how I'm processing, the faults that I enact in the world, the mistakes that I make, the ways in which I'm a good and bad mother, the ways in which I'm a good and bad daughter, the ways in which I hear my mother but don't interpret her lessons deeply enough, the way that I can grow and shift and be a person by the end of the book who's, yeah, finding great awe and beauty with just the sound of the coffee being made for her in the morning. And that is all aiming very specifically at undoing some of the really bad cultural beliefs that surround disability.
Mm.
So the philosophy aspect of it is about authenticity to really how I think, rather than I have this big goal to like teach everybody about, about it's just you can't know me without me sort of
Sure.
occasionally referencing Kant, hopefully
Right.
not obnoxiously, but
Right.
it just happens sometimes.
Sounds,
Federer, Kant, they go hand in
yeah,
hand.
of course. Sounds like a pretty good
So
life, like talking with other really smart people, over a drink at a bar in Brooklyn, a lot of the book is that.
yeah, I
um
mean that is a lot of the book is
the
like,
life of the
what would it
mind.
be like to have a beer with me? Like it's
Yes.
like this.
Right. Um,
This.
so a lot of the trips, I mean, maybe this is an obvious statement for a lot, a lot of us take trips based on other experiences, but a lot of yours are more direct. The I can't even imagine the pain, the rage, the upset, you write about in the beginning of the book where Jay and Colin are
Mhm,
colleagues slash kind of friends maybe at the beginning, and
mhm,
you're talking, and they I can especially Colin said some really hateful things, really, really ignorant things. And you write about, quote, something had shifted in me.
mhm.
And I believe that's kind of what leads to your Rome trip, either directly or indirectly. I wonder if you could say as much or as little as you want about
Yeah.
that opening and those really hateful, ignorant conversation, or comments that come up in the conversation about, you talked about worth and ethics and all that.
Yeah, I was just having a beer with my friends and who are both philosophers as well, and who are in my same PhD program at the time. And we were talking about a bioethics case that has to do with IVF and deafness, and it's a very famous bioethics case, and it's one that I taught as a bioethicist. And Colin just makes an argument that, deafness would disqualify, any ethical parent would find deafness as such a disqualifying factor that they should immediately have to abort their child. And that in fact, all disability lowers the, it lowers the quality of one's life so profoundly that all disabled lives should be, detected in utero and aborted. And the thing is like, that's not a new argument. That's eugenics. Like, Colin does not invent eugenics in Easy Beauty. He is in fact just repeating a very long, part of a very long conversation, a very historical conversation, and one that has deep, deep roots in the United States. And so, and it's also, there was a study just, I think in 2021 that showed that, 80+%, I can't remember the exact number, but they polled physicians in 2021 or 2022. They polled physicians and said, does disability in any way affect how you see the quality of your patient's life? And over 80+% said yes, that they found disability to be something that made life less worth living. And I think a lot of people hold that belief. I think every single one of us, and this is something we should probably really investigate within ourselves, holds some eugenicist beliefs, has some sort of idea that certain qualities are less valuable or should be edited out of society. And it's just everywhere. So the fact that Colin says that was nothing new to me. I'd been hearing an argument about my body somehow making my life worse or something like that. I've been hearing that my whole life, and vehemently disagreeing, thinking my life is actually pretty cool. But the difference was that in that moment, it was the first time that I realized that when I was faced with such dehumanizing sentences or theories, that what I tended to do was retreat into this sort of isolated mental space that I call the neutral room, and just sort of wait for whatever ugliness I was enduring to pass, or whatever pain I was experiencing to pass. And it was the first time that I actually caught myself doing this, and then kind of sat in this retracted mental space and thought like, oh, maybe if I can't figure out how to have a language to advocate for the worthiness of my life and to enter a moment like this and argue, then maybe I'm actually complicit with these bad beliefs about my body,
like
or
a room
body.
within a room, no? It's like a meta
Huh?
thing. It's like a room within a room. It's like a room
Yeah.
within the neutral room. Like you
Yeah.
realizing, yeah, wow. Love
Yeah.
it.
It's like I got outside the neutral, I got to walk around the neutral room or something, see myself inside it and go, hey, maybe you should not do
Yeah.
this. Like,
Yeah.
but knowing that you shouldn't do it, or knowing that you need to enter these conversations with, um, more advocacy or self-worth, like knowing it doesn't make it so. And the book is really situated deeply and intentionally in my struggle to get out of that self-effacing and frankly harmful, retracted mental, and I don't mean harmful to me, I mean harmful to other people, retracted mental space, and to be more present. And I very intentionally write the book just in that struggle, so it doesn't end, the book ends right where I'm getting a clue about how to be
I'm
a
sorry.
more, okay,
Thank you. Here we
no
go.
problem.
So am I correct in drawing the link then between, so there was the incredibly dehumanizing language used, and then the trip to Rome, and it's like, okay, so yeah, sorry, backing up a little bit too. I think you just call him the indifferent man. I don't know if he's given a name in the book.
No,
He's the
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Is he given a name?
No, just the indifferent man. Yeah.
Indifferent man. So obviously, with Colin, a lot of people, there's a lot of mansplaining to say the least, and he's just saying, no, there's an objective beauty, like there's a scale 1 through 10, and you know I'm only drawn to the most beautiful, beautiful of all, and it's objective, either yes or no, right? And
Well,
then go ahead.
yeah, I think he's less like, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's less that he's like beauty is objective. I think he's more like, I'm very aware, he's saying like, I'm very aware that the media has told
A
me, or
certain
like
type of beauty, right?
socializing forces have told me that there's a certain type of woman's body that's beautiful, and
Mm.
I am influenced by that. And I think he's, a lot of people really, don't like him in the book, or find him to be really repulsive. And I find him to be difficult, certainly, but in a way, I find him to be really refreshing and
Mm.
honest, because all he says is what is absolutely 100% true, which is we live in a society that feeds us a version of what is beautiful and what is attractive and what is sexually appropriate and what we
Mm.
should find sexually desirable. And then we see that messaging over and over and over and over and over again. And each one of us who are alive, are in some way influenced by that messaging, and then make massive life decisions
Hmm.
based on that messaging, meaning like who we date, how we spend our money, how we think of our own bodies, our own self-esteem,
Plastic surgery.
plastic surgery, what we buy, clothes we buy, the ways that we give our precious time and life.
Mm.
And some of us may be more influenced than others. Some of us may be trying to regain some control over that messaging and reject it, but we all hear it, and we're all in some ways in relation to it. And the indifferent man just says, yeah, I'm buying in, and I want a hot woman, and I want her to look like what the magazines tell me, and I know why I think this, and I can't change it, and who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
So is that the way I wish the world functioned? No, but I admire his honesty,
Mm.
and I don't think he's quite as evil as people want to make him out to be. I think he just has more radical honesty than a
Mm.
lot of people are willing to have with themselves.
So you go to Rome, you to see Bernini and the sculptures, and the Greeks had talked about beauty is, I guess in this case, objective. It's a proportion. There were people who had almost literally done like measurements of like the statues and what was considered to be beautiful. I remember hearing a study a long time ago done, like about symmetry in the face. And
Yeah.
apparently like Denzel Washington was like, had the greatest rate or whatever. And
Wow.
it's
Well,
hard to argue that one. That's a pretty good looking
yeah.
dude. Even though he's like 97 years old now, he still looks like he's 22. But anyways, um, and in some ways you were kind of looking for an event like your dad would. Is that safe to say? Like you were looking to be accosted by beauty. You're looking to be just like, boom, here it is. And that there was one sort of beauty. But also that the beauty at the Borghese, am I saying that correctly?
The Borghese Gardens,
The
yeah.
Gardens was generative to you. And I think that's maybe where the palm tree um example is used, where scary is how you pronounce it.
Elaine Scary, yeah.
You were talking about how she, something like a palm tree, it's like, okay, we know it's beautiful, but you forget about it, and then you look at it again, you're like, that is beautiful. I'd put it away. I guess I'm my long-winded way of getting at what in what ways were you approaching beauty as you went to Rome, and maybe how you changed your mind as that trip happened at the Borghese Gardens, and looking at all the beautiful art.
Yeah, well, there's that, and then the palm trees come up in Lake Como, which is Lake Como
Lake
is
Como, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, is sort of almost offensively beautiful and
You said you cussed,
pleasurable.
right? You said you cursed out loud when you saw the
Yeah,
beauty.
I mean, I really would too, and because it's just the weather is incredible, and the water's gorgeous, and the
Mm.
sun is, like outlining the waves, and there's all these wild rosemary bushes that grow everywhere, so the air smells this beautiful like herbal scent. And I was
Mm.
walking in rose gardens, and these lemon trees are everywhere, and after a while you're just like, oh my God, it's enough. Like,
Uh-huh.
just like looking at these mountains, and you're like, ah, I'm just overwhelmed by how powerful the beauty in the natural world can be. But I think that, you know, I'm very influenced by at the beginning of the book by my father's sort of desire to be chasing
Mm.
the sort of like finer edges of things, like the sort of thin edge of experience where like something tips from
Mm-hmm.
safe to thrilling, or like exciting to, dangerous even, and like the edges of what's safe or expected, and sometimes really extreme experiences of beauty can do that. They can have like a physical, almost like arresting sense. We say things like, oh, it made my heart stop, or my breath caught in my throat, or my heart was beating and pound, like
Right.
these are all ways in which I was thinking about beauty in this real height of feeling. Um, and that's great. I love those experiences. I still seek them. I think the problem was that, you know, my father was less good at appreciating, and I am too. And this is something I try to figure out in the book, like the kind of beauty that is quieter, the
Mm-hmm.
kind of beauty of domestic spaces, or the kind of beauty you make with another person over time and commitment. Um, and those feelings of beauty don't always feel like this exciting adventure and this chase and this like
Mm-hmm.
awe and this, so balancing those two things, or coming to terms with those two experiences of beauty without losing either one of them,
Mm-hmm.
is a real tension and drive of the book for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
because it's got to be a balance, right? I mean, you don't want to lose that thirst, that you know hunger for beauty, for adventure, because you're going to find more things than you would originally. But there's also going to make you lose out on some of those. Yeah, the dangerous type of things that don't necessarily have to be done, and sometimes are hurtful to, like you said, others or yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
we're down to 2.5 minutes again. Yeah.
time flies when you're having a great conversation.
Yeah.